NBN connections will be probably 5 years from now. Now imagine that what that does in terms of cultural events anywhere in the world. We went to the Netherlands where they have an avant-garde opera, and we took a 4K digital cinema camera there and broadcast live across the fiber optics to San Diego this modern opera, as well as a number of other places around the world. And I can tell you that each of those little candle flames looked absolutely sharp. It was just unreal. It's photorealistic. So this means now, essentially, that any event culturally in the world can be in Tasmania. And if you think, well, that's fine if you've got, all the money in the world area that, buys all that fancy stuff and everything, the projectors, the screens, and everything. Here's the chairman of Sharp. He's saying basically, if you think about, just go back to how fast the size of the TVs, the flat panels, has grown. He says in 10 years, basically, they're going to be as big as the walls in your house. Now, actually, it won't be probably LCDs. It might be organic LEDs or some other things. I think it'll be, you just go down to your local retailer, buy it by the yard like you do wallpaper, come back, plaster it up, plug it into the NBN, and bring in Tahiti in high definition, right? Or as I said earlier today, somebody asked me, what's the killer app for the NBN? I said, it's birthday parties. You've got your little 1-year-old sitting there with the cake, and if only Aunt Mabel from Perth and, Uncle Jim from Brisbane could be there, and the walls transform, and their living rooms are now sold to your living rooms, and you're in the same room for all intents and purposes. They may not be able to eat the cake, but otherwise. And so Sharp has a business plan based on this vision. Well, they're going to love the NBN. And they're going to love the 130 other million homes by 2013. That's what they're counting on for their business, is to link up those walls. Now, there's islands and there's islands. I know you're saying you're isolated here in Tasmania. Australia mainland isn't very far from you. I've done a lot of work with French Polynesia, Tahiti, and its smaller islands like Moorea and Bora Bora. The French government is spending $80 million to put a fiber optic cable from Hawaii down to French Polynesia and then to link across the islands. That initially will have a capacity of 150,000 megabits per second. And it'll go to 1 million megabits per second over the first 10 years into Tahiti. And the reason that the French government is doing that is because they want the citizens of Tahiti to be coupled to the global economy. So they can make call centers, they can do all kinds of things that will actually do a great deal to raise the per capita income in Tahiti. Now I know you've got education problems we were talking about in Tasmania. Nothing compared to the education problems they've got in French Polynesia, but they view this as their salvation. This is the thing that will help them create the economy that can pay for the things that they're going to need, but also to support their coral reefs, which is their major tourist attraction. And so we've worked with another island, Taiwan, where we are now putting movie cameras, video cameras, underwater into the reef. And this is, again, in San Diego. That's live footage from the reefs in Taiwan. And so this means that all the work you've done to preserve the environment here in Tasmania with these high-definition cameras can be projected to would-be tourists all around the world. And you have two folds about that. One, you get people to know about Tasmania, there'll be advertising associated with that and so forth, but then they don't necessarily have to come and mess up your environment here physically to enjoy Tasmania. And so you can export what you worked so hard to keep pristine here without having to have the ecotourism that actually messes up the place by bringing all those people. So this is a part of this new world. I'll just end by going back to Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat. You know, when he writes this book, which talks about the complete industrial transformation, that China could not have risen without the internet. Walmart couldn't be Walmart without the fact that when you buy an item from any Walmart store in the world, over the internet goes an order to China to manufacture another version of that item, that they keep track. The profit center for Walmart is the aisle. And that aisle is auctioned off to many tens of thousands of companies that make products, and if they don't increase the profit on the aisle, they're out of there. Okay? All done by computers and the internet. But that's the shared internet. That's not what we're talking about with the NBN. We're talking 100 megabits going to a gigabit per second. The world was flattened by the 1 megabit internet. And it wasn't streaming high definition, the ability to project anybody, anywhere, anytime. Those sets of technologies will be what Friedman writes about 10 years from now, when essentially everyone in the world is on the same island, is in the same room, in the same point. And then that's the world in which economies are going to be developed. And in which case, Tasmania, with its first mover advantage on the NBN, has an unprecedented opportunity to change for the better so that it can preserve its way of life. Thank you.
Feel free to grab a seat on the couch. Well, thank you very much, Professor Smarr, for that very enlightening lecture. I did notice in a couple of the images when Victoria Premier John Brumby was asking questions, there was someone actually asleep in the back row on the other side, but pleased to say I didn't see anyone asleep out here tonight, so once again, thank you. So we now invite Professor Smarr to take a seat on the couch, and joining him on that couch will be Professor Jonathan West, Founding Director of the Australian Innovation Research Centre. Professor West, prior to assuming his current appointment, spent 18 years at Harvard University, where he was Associate Professor in the Graduate School of Business Administration. With the feedback from TCCI members, Professor West will chat with Professor Smarr about his lecture and the implications of the National Broadband Network for Tasmania. Following this, Professor West will conduct a 10-minute question and answer session from the floor. Go ahead, gentlemen.